early 1970s were an interesting time for horror. It was very much a melting pot of transitioning ideas. The industry was brimming with angles and directions that the horror industry could potentially take the form of, and it kind of marked the beginning of a period of crystallization for the genre after at least a couple of decades worth of experimentation and censorship battles. I mean, you've got to imagine, through the 1960s there were several different shades of horror being developed. Whether it was the light and hokey spook show antics of gimmick cinema as helmed by the likes of William Castle, the bloody and twisted works of Herschel Gordon Lewis, or international advances in the form of gorier, grittier and nastier horror efforts arriving from both the giallo genre and the raunchier efforts of British cinema. By the time the 70s had rolled around, what had started as gently testing the waters in taste and decency with films like Blood Feast and Homicidal had now developed into much more graphic and challenging pictures like I Drink Your Blood, The Wicker Man and The Devils. Ultimately, while campy horror would still very much have its place in the horror film ecosystem, it would seem that by 1974 the debate on the direction of mainstream horror had well and truly been had, with The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Black Christmas, and a growing interest in giallo with films like Deep Red and What Have They Done to Your Daughters, leading to a coagulation that would eventually solidify into the slasher genre, which would come to dominate the majority of the 80s and early 90s in terms of cinema and home video. But that weird 70s melting pot would quite often allow for some very odd combinations to spring forth. Films like The Abominable Dr. Phibes and Blood-Sucking Freaks would quite often take several elements from horror movies of the 50s and 60s and either amp them up in the case of Freaks or subvert them spectacularly in the case of Phibes. Indeed, if you're looking for some of the more out-there combinations of styles, genres and ideas, cinema 1970 to 1976 is a more than serviceable window to the weird. And it's in this brief passage of time that we land with today's film, 1973's Cannibal Girls. A film that, well, it couldn't quite decide which hook to hang its hat on, so it sort of went for them all. In fact, the film goes off in so many different directions, I feel like I may need a second opinion on this one because it's quite easy to get lost in its layers. That's why, in order to stop me going completely off track, I've enlisted the help of fellow film critic, cult enthusiast, and just all-round decent guy, Seth from the Hellbound Horror Show. Seth, it's great to have you aboard.
Heck yeah! I am so pumped to be talking about Cannibal Girls with you. I love your channel and I am so stoked to be a part of this review. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent stuff. Right, so where was I? Oh yeah, Cannibal Girls. Now, this film could have quite easily worked under multiple different styles or tones, but as mentioned, it kind of went all in on trying to do a bit of everything. There are moments in this film where things get a bit Gordon Lewis level gory. There are points where it seems to draw some inspiration from the Coffin Joe franchise. It's subversive with its plot twists through the runtime, which is quite reminiscent of movies like The Wicker Man or Twins of Evil. But equally, there are moments where it almost feels like it's satirising the horror genre at that point in history, with a level of subtlety where you never quite know if it's working towards being scathing or testing its luck with the audience. In fact, two of its more interesting elements came about as a result of this attempt to play things a little bit different. Isn't that right, Seth?
You're totally right. The first thing a viewer is going to notice is that the majority of the film's dialogue was improvised. When your film costs $9,000, you only have 9 days to shoot it, and your script isn't totally fleshed out, well, guess what? The movie still needs to get made. You can't push back productions, so you make the actors improvise their dialogue. With most of the actors being very green with little experience, this can lead to some less than stellar outcomes. I do want to note that director Ivan Reitman later revisited mostly improvised dialogue in the Ghostbuster movies with much better results. The next major thing of note is the warning bell. Now, who doesn't like a little bit of gimmick cinema every now and then? Cannibal Girls is a Canadian horror film, so when they looked for distribution in the United States, they settled with American International Pictures, who was helmed by Roger Corman. When promoting the film, Corman thought of the idea of a warning bell, which would sound off anytime a violent or erotic scene was about to be played. That way, if you were of the faint of heart, you could just close your eyes to avoid these naughty bits. The gimmick was even showcased in the trailer.
So, with so much going on tonally, you'd think the plot would be some kind of hyper-complex 4D chess-level Hitchcockian fodder, right? Well, Actually, it's surprisingly straightforward. The majority of the film takes place in the very real town of Farmhouse, which has recently begun to experience a string of disappearances and murders, of which the town's law enforcement seems relatively calm given the scale of the disappearances on hand. Before too long, we get introduced to our main characters for the film, Gloria and Cliff, a recently shacked up couple who are out-of-towners, and they're quite down on their luck recently as they're having a spot of car trouble. After managing a final push to get into town, the pair arrive in Farnhamville and decide to take the car to the shop, and to also take a day or two to rest up after the long trip. It's here that the owner of a local motel shares with them a grisly folktale of the town's past. On the outskirts of the town, a small farmhouse was home to 3 young women who notoriously kidnapped and brutally murdered several drifters, who they either stalked or picked up with the aim of murdering them and eating their flesh as part of what appears to be some kind of cannibalistic cult ritual. In film, this is played as a fake-out. We think it's happening in present times, but it's quickly revealed to be a flashback as told by the motel owner to Cliff and Gloria, who informs them that the events were very likely to have happened, but that it was all a long time ago, and that they shouldn't worry about anything like that happening now. Right. Anyway, the old farmhouse is still standing out in the sticks and it's been converted into a family restaurant, and the motel owner is very keen to stress what a lovely and clean place it is. So, Cliff and Gloria decide to head over there the next day to grab a bite to eat.
At the old farmhouse, Cliff and Gloria meet the eccentric Reverend Alex St. John. Reverend Alex St. John is an elegant and intriguing host. He shows Cliff and Gloria around the house before sitting them down to be served their meals. Now there's only one item on the menu. Any guesses to what that one item is? Yeah, you got it. They are served human flesh. But Cliff and Gloria don't know it. They also don't know that the Cannibal Girls from the flashbacks are the ones serving them their meals. As the night expires, the Cannibal Girls, Reverend Alex St. John, Cliff and Gloria sit around drinking wine and getting all sorts of toasty. Cliff believes that they've overstayed their welcome and insists that they need to get going. Reverend Alex St. John demands that they stay the night. After a bit of back and forth, Cliff and Gloria decide to stay. This decision, though, could prove to be a fatal one. After all, being locked in a house with Cannibal Girls is rarely a good thing. I don't want to spoil the ending, but I will say that there are a few twists and turns and some really fun and clever moments sprinkled throughout.
Thanks, ma'am. So, as you've probably guessed, this film was a bit of a weird one, and I think its oddness fundamentally stems from its scripting. On its own, the basic plot for this would maybe be seen as bandwagoning a little bit. This is post-Manson family cult-style grindhouse, which, for the time, wasn't really anything revolutionary. In fact, had they not decided to improvise a decent chunk of the dialogue, I think this film probably would have ended up as a fairly drab affair. But what we have here is a situation, to me at least, of the planets aligning perfectly. Seriously, had any one element of this script not played out as it had, this could have easily just been a massive mess. But because they have some seriously talented improvisational actors on the film in the form of Eugene Levy, Andrea Martin and Ronald Ulrich, it helps to feed the scenes with some genuinely lovely little lines and physical touches, which in turn helps to really amp up the script, taking it from being just a kind of alright production to something actually quite memorable. Now that's not to say the dialogue is perfect. Where it hits fantastically, with some genuinely well-played deliveries and some even more delightfully eccentric performances from several of the cast throughout. But there are just a few instances where either it just about fails to hit the spot for me, or it feels like it's meandering as the actors try in vain to get to the end of their narrative thread, while also trying to not just steamroll it. I don't think there was anything offensively off the mark for me, but there were just a couple of moments where I kind of wished they'd just get to the point. Equally not helping things is the act structure and pacing, which, to me at least, are a bit overstuffed. The basic key beats of couple gets stranded in a strange town and it turns out that people are up to no good is actually a pretty succinct narrative. But the joy of having an entire town in on what goes on at the farmhouse is that you get to play with the who's in on it and who's out to try and help the couple plotline. A plotline that really isn't explored in this film. Instead, once Gloria and Cliff arrive at the restaurant, it's pretty much just killing time till the big twist ending. That means plenty of shots of Gloria running around in pitch-black woodlands, Cliff and Gloria wandering around the town not really doing much, and even when there is scope to play around with the town's residents, the film instead just does the exact opposite, doubling down on the fact that everyone in the town is in on Reverend Alex's racket and wants to help. I don't know, I just feel like this film could have done a bit more with its premise than just make the last two acts a bit of a runaround with not much point. It just comes across as padded more than anything else. With a seasoned editor on the helm to remove the slightly stodgy dialogue and help to cut the padding down, this could have easily made a really solid 40-minute short. As it stands, it's a 35 to 40-minute good movie watered down to a 79-minute alright movie, which I feel is a bit of a shame.
I totally agree. There is some potential with this script. There were elements that totally worked for me, but I'd be lying if I said the film didn't stumble from time to time. The rush production is clearly visible on screen. If they revised the script and thought things through a bit more, I think this could have been a true cult classic. Anytime that you go into production without a finished script, dialogue and all, you're asking for trouble. It's actually amazing that the film didn't suffer even more from the lack of a finished script. That's just a testament to the young talent in front of the camera and behind it. Speaking of the talent behind the camera,
the screenplay was written by Robert Sandler, with the actual dialogue largely improvised by the cast, the producer Daniel Goldberg, and the director. Sandler has 20 writing credits, including multiple episodes of Fraggle Rock, and probably his biggest credit was that he wrote the 1996 TV movie adaptation of Journey to the Center of the Earth. As for who directed this movie, Seth, what do you know about a director by the name of Ivan Reitman?
Ivan Reitman is an icon in the comedy genre. The Canadian film director's filmography is expansive, but his notable hits as a director were Ghostbusters, Twins, Ghostbusters 2, Kindergarten Cop, and Evolution. That's not even getting into his outstanding producer credits. Ivan Reitman was great at letting his actors improvise their lines, and it worked extremely well in the Ghostbuster films, but it wasn't as crisp in Cannibal Girls. That's not to say Reitman is at fault though. In fact, his direction in Cannibal Girls is quite good.
On the direction front, given this was Reitman's second ever feature film, I think it's actually pretty impressive just how clean of a vision he puts on display here. It's clear Reitman had a vision for this film and he really wanted to make the best product he could with the resources he had. There's some wonderfully crisp shots of the forests and mountain ranges that surround the town. Shallow depth of field is used very effectively in drawing attention to key elements in the scene. And in a nice touch that I feel shows his ability as a director, even when key cast members don't have anything to say or do within the scene, they can often be seen in the background of sequences getting up to something that's aiding the plot progression. My personal favourite being when Gloria is looking to book a bus ticket to Toronto and Cliff can be seen talking to the sheriff in the blurred middle distance. The cast too also seem to have been handled well by Ivan. While history would go on to show how good of an improviser Eugene Levy is, it still requires a decent hand on the rudder to really pull the best out of an actor, whether they're equipped to handle improv or not. And here, the cast all really put in a good turn and really make use of their set spaces and the freedom to say what they want or what they need to as long as it gets them to the end of the scene. I get the feeling with this one that it was very much a collaborative effort, and I think Ivan probably got his hands as dirty as possible on this shoot, and he seems to have been having fun in doing so. To me, while the direction was effective, the cine does kind of fall a bit flat. While there's definitely a decent variety of shot types which does help to keep things moving along at a more than decent pace, and the location work is really quite nicely handled, the sets, to me at least, feel a bit sparse for the most part, and that underdressing of the sets combined with an almost hesitance to really do much with the internal shoots other than capture what's being said has left this film feeling a little drab and flat once things move indoors. This probably isn't helped by the set lighting, which, for the most part, gives off an almost floodlit vibe, barring the occasional indoor nighttime sequence. I don't know, I feel like Reitman really flourished in his outdoor work, but with the limitations on budget, as soon as things moved indoors, he just sort of shot for function.
You're spot on with direction. It's not a masterpiece, but you can tell there is talent behind the camera. It's a skilled director still honing his craft. Cinematography on Cannibal Girls was done by Robert Saad. The shot selections in the film is by no means bad, but it is one of the staler elements to the film. Robert Saad was talented, and he did go on to have a career in the business, most notably being the director of photography on David Cronenberg's Shivers and being the cinematographer on the later Police Academy films. There's a reason that Saad didn't have the prolific Hollywood career that Reitman had.
Performance-wise, well, I don't think anyone would win any awards for their involvement in this movie, but hot damn if they aren't entertaining and clearly having a ball in this thing. Eugene Levy and Andrea Martin, for the most part, play wonderfully off each other as Cliff and Gloria. They just really seem to have a decent working relationship, and they're able to bounce off each other really nicely throughout. You could genuinely believe them to be a recently dating couple who've just been thrust into this world of cannibal girls and cults. Arguably, the best performance in this thing, for my money, has to be Ronald Ulrich as the Reverend Alex St. John, who's just... well, he's on another planet, quite frankly, for most of the runtime. A fabulously eccentric performer. Whenever he's on screen, he pretty much instantly had my attention in any scene he played in.
Roland Ulrich really did steal the show. He was such a pleasure, or I guess maybe in this case, a displeasure to watch. His performance was captivating. As for the others in the cast, you are spot on. It's funny to think that both Eugene Levy and Andrea Martin got their acting film debuts in Ivan Reitman's first film, Foxy Lady. Reitman must have enjoyed working with them so much that he brought them back for his second feature film, and I'm glad that he did. Levy and Martin paired very well together, and their chemistry was undeniable.
And finally, the soundtrack. And I was actually quite surprised by this one. For the early 70s, this film actually utilises scoring techniques such as deep whomping bass notes and strikes, which wouldn't really come to prominence till the synth-driven slasher era. It subverts its darker tones with a really quite serene soundtrack that really doesn't make you think that this is going to be nearly as exploitational as it ends up being. I really liked this one, and I think it helps to tie up and solidify the direction, script and cine into a nice solid package.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, the soundtrack did nothing for me. I watched this film twice, and I barely noticed it on both viewings. So, not noticing the soundtrack means two things. It did nothing to impress me, but it also did nothing to distract from the film. In a case where I don't remember a soundtrack, it immediately becomes serviceable. Neither great nor terrible, just somewhere in between.
While Cannibal Girls never made it to the UK on VHS, it did get released in several parts of Europe, including the Netherlands and France. Exact dates on these releases are a little sketchy, but based on the cover art and style, I'd hazard a loose guess at it releasing somewhere between 1978 and 1981. It didn't actually make it to UK shores until 2011, when it arrived on DVD courtesy of Nucleus Films, who chose to release this movie with a raft load of extras on Valentine's Day of that year. Aww. And in terms of releases, that's about it. It's available on Amazon Prime Video in the UK, but there's no Blu-ray release or a HD scan planned. Ultimately, Cannibal Girls, while not perfect, does have a lot of potential, and I think it's very interesting to look back on this film knowing what Ivan Reitman and Eugene Levy would go on to do. This isn't a mind-melting slice of original filmmaking to me, but it's a relatively tight package that tries to spin a lot of plates and manages to keep most of them going. Whether you're going into this for the campy, eccentric performances and the gimmick cinema aspect, or the gorier, grittier elements that play out later in the movie, there's a bit of something for everyone here, and I think you'll either dig the melting pot approach or get really irritated that it won't stay in its lane.
At first, you're gonna think that Cannibal Girls will be your typical 70s exploitation film. And while there is plenty of flesh eating and a plethora of pretty naked women, Cannibal Girls stands above the pack in many different regards. It's not the most exploitative, which at the time was the reason you went to see these films, but there is substance to be found. Sure, the low budget and lack of production hurt the final product, but the young budding talent in front of the camera and behind it more than make up for the film's shortcomings. If you're a fan of weird 70s grindhouse horror films that aren't afraid to be a little humorous, then Cannibal Girls is the film for you.
Seth, it's been an absolute honour and a privilege to have your time today, and we'd love to have you back in future. But tell me, where can the lovely ladies and gents of the Horror Consortium find you these days?
Yeah, I'm on YouTube at the Hellbound Horror Show. I also have a Twitter and an Instagram that I don't really use. But I love reviewing lesser talked about horror films. I also love meeting people with similar interests, just like yourself. I am so glad that you asked me to be part of this review, and I am so grateful for that. I love what you do, man. Just keep up the good work. Thank you again for having me on.
Excellent stuff. Thank you so much again for dropping by. I've put links to your channel in the description, and I'll have to pop by your place sometime. Anyway, till next time, viewers.